Thank you for your patience. On behalf of the Theosophical Society in America and our host committee, I'd like to welcome you to Building Bridges, Religious Leaders in Conversation with the Dalai Lama. Before the Dalai Lama joins us on stage, I'd like to tell you a bit about the panelists who will be here joining him about midway through our program. The distinguished members of our panel are representative of the three Abrahamic traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Their work demonstrates the deep understanding of the importance and commitment to interfaith initiatives. Rabbi Michael Lerner is the rabbi of Beit Tikkun, a synagogue without walls, and editor of Tikkun magazine, a quarterly critique of politics, culture, and society that has circulated for over 25 years. Dr. Ingrid Mattson is professor of Islamic studies, founder of the Islamic Chaplaincy Program, and director of the McDonald Center for Islamic Studies and Christian-Muslim Relations at Hartford Seminary in Hartford, Connecticut. And Reverend Peg Chamberlain is the president of the National Council of Churches of Christ, USA, which is made up of more than 100,000 congregations and more than 45 million Christians worldwide. I know, in the United States. I didn't know there were that many Christians in the United States. Before I introduce our panel moderator, I would like to ask Reverend Jesse Jackson to stand in the audience, please. Can we see you? Reverend Jackson is attending a number of celebrations for the birthday of Nelson Mandela today. As my personal spiritual advisor, it's a full-time job, and I don't pay overtime. But thank you, Reverend Jackson. Our panel moderator, Dr. Ibu Patel, is founder and president of the Interfaith Youth Corps, located right here in Chicago, whose mission is to build the global interfaith youth movement that works to promote interfaith cooperation. Ibu will begin our program in conversation with His Holiness. His Holiness was invited to visit Chicago by the Theosophical Society in America. Tim Boyd is the president of the Theosophical Society and the guiding force of today's program. Let's welcome Tim.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. It's such a good thing to see so many fellow Chicagoans and people from around the country here today to offer our greetings to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Thank you for being here. On behalf of the Theosophical Society in America, I'd like to welcome you all to today's program. And I'd also like to say that the Theosophical Society has its founding in 1875. I always like to say a few things about the TS. It has its international headquarters in Chennai, India, and its American headquarters are right here in the Chicago area out in Wheaton, Illinois. It has a couple of things that it has focused on since its first days. The primary one is the unity of all life, and we have also focused on an open-minded inquiry into the world's religions, science, and philosophy, and on spiritual self-transformation. The Theosophical Society has a long history with His Holiness, dating back to 1956, when His Holiness made a visit to the international headquarters of the TS in Chennai, India. Except for a visit he had made to Communist China in 1954 in an attempt to negotiate with Mao Zedong and other of the Chinese leaders, this was the first time he had left Tibet. Again in 1981, when His Holiness first visited the Chicago area, he stayed with us at our American headquarters in Wheaton, Illinois. I can remember in 1981, at that time, he spoke to a local high school, and there were a couple of hundred kids that attended. And although they warmed to his message and were moved by his message. Many of them didn't have any idea who he was. Well, obviously, much has changed since then. Today, His Holiness regularly speaks to audiences of thousands of people and is one of the most recognized and most respected men in the world. And of course, although much has changed since those days, there is still much that has not changed. Today, a significant portion of the population of the people of Tibet still live in exile since their exodus in 1959 following the Chinese occupation. Thousands of Tibetans every year risk the very difficult crossing into Nepal and India, fleeing from current repressive situations in Tibet. And even though the political situation in Tibet is something that has been difficult to change, probably the deepest change that His Holiness has tried to address, and the most intractable change, seems to be a change in the human heart and mind. His continual focus on those universal qualities, universal human qualities of compassion, of kindness, of love, and patience, and the way he has embodied those qualities have made him one of the great teachers that we have in the world today. So it's our hope that today's program of conversations with religious leaders with His Holiness will bring us one step closer to making an inner change that will perhaps move us to some significant and meaningful outer activity. So I'd ask you now to please join me in welcoming Ibu Patel and His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet, Tenzin Gyatso. Thank you.
So this morning is about how religion can be a bridge of cooperation and not a barrier of division or a bomb of destruction. And we have with us probably the world's leading example of faith as a source of inspiration and as a bridge of cooperation, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And we have with us three people that I am proud to call my friends, three very prominent American interfaith leaders who will join us a little bit later. So, I have a confession to make. I know you're not that kind of religious leader, but still.
그래.
I got some help with these questions from the network of college students we work with at the Interfaith Youth Corps. So I'll name some of them as their questions become relevant to this conversation. The first question that I wanted to explore with you, Your Holiness, is in your beautiful new book, Toward a True Kinship of Faiths, you say that working for interfaith cooperation is one of your three main missions, along with promoting basic human values and solving the crisis of Tibet. How did it come to be so important to you?
Last sentence was pögol. Pöta 주셔.
담대 관련 같은 군대 도중에서 숨져만.
여러분.
뒤에는 숨버티다 배우자도.
어로.
배우던데 배우지. 단 이번에 주로네. 단 주로들이 계신 분들이 잘 가르쳐 참 그랬어.
If we use common sense, then it becomes clear. Reason, every day when we look newspaper or radio, there are a lot of reports of violence. Then among them, some violence, unfortunate things, some relation with different religious faith. I think yesterday I already mentioned, if we really study very carefully, then I think in the past as well as today, I think some of the conflict in the name of religion, their main sort of cause, not religious faith, but power and some economic interest or like that. But at the same time, they say once concerned people use the religious name, it touches human emotion. Then I think the sort of enthusiasm even sacrifice their own life. So then, if we just look these sort of situation, this news, then short moment, some kind of sad feeling, then disappear. It's not right. We are part of the humanity. Each individual have to sort of do something. Then in my own case, I am Buddhist. And one of the Buddhist prayer, pray all sentient being. That's a little bit that's unrealistic. Infinite sentient being. Of course, it is very good to sort of also to increase our sort of determination, willpower. But then directly, realistically, if you really pray for entire sentient being, then you must think and must take some kind of serious concern about well-being of now 7 billion human beings on this planet. So, the unhappy event in the name of religion there, when we saw that, then we must do something. If these different religious traditions truly no possibility to live together, to sit together, then we can't help. But that's not the case. Look, India. I think at least 2,000-3,000 years, homegrown different religious tradition there. In philosophical field or certain sort of views, debate seriously, but still respect each other and live together. Then eventually, Zoroastrian from Iran, ancient Iran, take refuge in India. Very small community, Parsi community in India. Of course, now this is too long. And anyway, Zoroastrian, then Judaism, Christianity, Islam, all these major religious traditions from outside India come India and live together. Now, last 1,000 years, almost all major religious traditions live together. Occasionally, some problem here and there. That's quite understandable. Several millions of human community, some mischievous people take for granted some problems. Even I think from the Buddhist viewpoint, even Buddha failed entire sort of Indian Buddhists become something very compassionate. I think even he failed. Then Jesus Christ or Muhammad also used to fail. So it is impossible. You see, everybody become something good. That is okay. That's understandable. But overall picture, I think recently I was in West India, Jodhpur, place called in Rajasthan, Jodhpur. I met, when I passing through my sort of hotel, one European approached towards me, and then he introduced himself, one Romanian, and he carries some research work about religious harmony in India. Then he told me he found one village, Muslim village, entire population Muslim, only 3 Hindu families. But these 3 Hindu families, no fear, full of sort of, I said, a friendly atmosphere. He's surprised, and he told me like that. So there are sort of what's the example or model, living things, living harmony there. So then there is really a possibility to develop that kind of spirit in different parts of the world where some conflict in the name of religion. So therefore, last now I think more than 40 years, almost 50 years, I fully committed to promote. And that also, out of my sort of awareness, the value of other tradition, as a result of meeting with practitioners of different tradition, when I met, discuss, exchange our deeper experiences, then it becomes very clear. The philosophical field, some say there's God, creator. Like Buddhism and Jainism say no God, no creator. Or big sort of differences, fundamental differences. That difference is quite sufficient to fight each other. But then, doesn't matter what these different sort of philosophy, what is the real purpose of these different philosophy? Same. The important, or is the practice of love, compassion, and with that, forgiveness, tolerance, and self-discipline, honest, and individual sort of level, contentment. These practice, all same. So these different philosophy, according to different mental disposition, these different philosophy is simply different way to approach, but same goal. So therefore, I fully committed. And as a result, I say, among different religious practitioners, I found more and more friends. So they really loves me. I am Buddhist. Philosophical viewpoint, I have different sort of views, but since say, I really respect, admire Christianity, Islam, and then actually 2000, because September 11th problem happened. Then some people generalize Islam as some kind of militant religion. That's unfair. So since then, I think after 1 year, that event in Washington sort of National Cathedral, some sort of meeting, prayer meeting, I told there, I expressed that due to some mischievous sort of activities, Muslim background, And you cannot generalize whole Islam is something negative. It is totally wrong. Few mischievous people in all traditions, among the Christian also, mischievous people there, among the Kasata Jodi, among the Hindus, among the Jews, among the Buddhists also, among the Tibetan Buddhists also, some mischievous people there. That's understandable. So due to some sort of because of the mischievous activities, and then generalize the whole tradition is something mischievous. It's totally wrong. So since then, I become defender of Islam religion. Like that. So looks is strange. I think firstly, Islam, one of the theistic religion, we not. I'm not. And then, historically, in India, the Muslim invasion also did a lot of destruction on Buddhist monasteries, Buddhist temples. But past is past. We have to act according to today's reality. So now today, the Muslim community in Bodh Gaya, I think their ancestor come there for destruction of Bodh Gaya temple. Now today, best friend of Buddhist pilgrims. Pilgrims. So they also need more Buddhist pilgrims, then their business grow. So Buddhists also, you see, their facility there because of this Muslim community. That's the reality. So we have to act according to today's reality. So all religious traditions have the same potential to bring inner peace through that way, family, because of the peaceful family, and then community, through that way, global level. So here, one thing I think we need is common effort. For example, ecology. Some people, some religious people, like some Burmese monk or Thai monk, they're quite active ecology. But the rest, just watching, it's not good. We have to put same effort. Common goal, we must make sort of
common effort.
Common effort. So for that reason, this kind of sort of meeting, more make known each other and share different experiences and discuss from sort of one's own tradition how much we can make contribution for a better world, like Christianity. I think like Christian brothers, sisters. As a matter of fact, I think the greatest contributor regarding education and all over the world. Sometimes there's a little missionary conversion also involved. That is sometimes created difficulties, problems, but otherwise, really, they made tremendous sort of contribution regarding education and health. We Buddhists fail that field, and Islam also not much. In ancient time, maybe in your own sort of area, I think Iran and Iraq, this area, I think ancient time, great philosopher, great sort of
astronomers.
We're working on it. We're working on it.
That
So modern time, you see, the religious people, we simply take concern their own sort of area. Now we believer, I think nearly 7 billion human beings, quite a big portion are believer. We also have the responsibility. So common effort. So that's my view.
Thank you. I want to ask one more question.
Yes.
I think it'll be a two-part question before we bring our friends on the stage. And one of the things I loved about Towards a True Kinship of Faiths is you point out the parts of different religions that you find beautiful, that you find inspiring.
Yes.
And you tell a history of encounters between different religions that's positive. And hidden in that book is the fact that you began doing this as a very young man. Your first meeting with the Theosophical Society, your initial encounter with Father Merton, and there is this growing group of young people today, an emerging generation, who is following your example and becoming interfaith leaders. And I'm wondering what advice you would have to give them. And I'd like to ask about a specific group of them, and this is a question that comes from a student named Adam Garner.
Adam Gardner.
And he asks, what place do young people who are humanists have in this growing generation of interfaith leaders? So what advice would you have for these young people who seek to follow your example as an interfaith leader? And what about those amongst them who are not specifically religious?
humanistic
나를 당보다 최대 유니도 슈누드네 다군다 시에 고티에 다른 지지저가 무슨 메시지 깔고 가나 지금부터 최대 메시지 메뉴에서 쉬어보도록.
So humanistic, when you mentioned, in the sense, not serious about religious faith.
Not that they're not. They don't believe in a specific religious tradition.
Yes. That is one of my main sort of effort. Now my number one commitment is to promote inner peace. Ultimately based on warm-heartedness. That the way of promotion, not based on religious faith, but based on our biological factor, and then scientific findings. That's the main reason, main sort of focusing, using these factors. A more compassionate mind, your physical health better, your relation with family member, community member, better, happier. Once we develop genuine sort of respect other, out of sense of concern of their well-being, then there is no room of violence, no room of cheating, no room of hypocrisy. If you, out of warm-heartedness, speak truthfully, honestly, and you can act transparently, that built trust. Trust built friendship. Happy society, happy family, irrespective of whether believer or non-believer. That's my main commitment. So here I found my friend, a very good friend. Some expressing to me, any moral ethics must be based on religious faith. I feel if we go that way, then moral ethics never be universal. Religion, no matter how sort of, because of the big religious tradition, cannot be universal. So any moral ethics based on religious faith, it never be universal. So beside religious faith, use our common sense, common experience, and scientific findings, and biological factors, that can be universal. So it easily introduced in secular education field. I think that's the reason India, 1,000 years secularism there and secular ethics there. At modern time, India's constitution based on secularism. As yesterday I mentioned, according to India's sort of the concept of secularism, not at all disrespect or sort of negative attitude towards religion, but rather respect all religions, and then including non-believers. So I think that's very, very practical, very universal. That's my view. So those people who really want, because of that, to do something for better world, better sort of community, and then, and meantime, not much sort of interest about religious faith, then should think this line. That's my view.
Thank you.
One time in Sweden, I met some small group of people. They have no interest about religious faith, but at the same time, they feel some kind of spirituality, some kind of inner value. They consider something very important. So such people there. Yes, finished now.
That was perfect. That was perfect. We're getting our signal from our friend.
Let's introduce our panel. Dr. Ingrid Mattson, Rabbi Michael Lerner.
Thank you.
And Reverend Peg Chamberlain.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So one of the most beautiful parts of His Holiness's new book is this encounter with Thomas Merton, when Father Merton comes and sees His Holiness, when they were both, when His Holiness was a young man. And part of the theme that His Holiness draws out from that is the importance of personal encounter to build interfaith cooperation and common efforts. And the three of you have been involved in such a range of that. And I wanted to begin by drawing those stories out, beginning with you, Reverend Chamberlain. Something powerful and terrible happened in Minneapolis a few years ago, but the response was beautiful. Will you tell us about that?
Well, many of you will remember that we lost a bridge in Minnesota and lost lives in that bridge loss. And the mayor and the governor called our office and said the community needs to gather in a prayerful sort of way, which I think is appropriate. I think we're going to struggle in the next few years to figure out how we gather publicly in a religiously diverse and public space. But within a few days, we had put together a wonderful gathering. It was very diverse, as it should have been. The victims in the bridge collapse came from a variety of religious traditions, Somali Muslim, Christian Greek Orthodox, Native American spirituality practitioner. We gathered at St. Mark's Cathedral, Episcopal Cathedral in Minneapolis, and it was packed. The whole balcony was packed with media. For some reason, this was a fairly important story internationally, partly that Minnesota could lose a bridge, but partly that we could gather in this way. I think it's probably the only time I'll be quoted in the Kuwait Times. But after the event, one of the reporters came down, and one of our staff were there, and he said to her, "Wow, you put this together in 3 days?" And she said, "No, it took 10 years." It's the relationship. Jay Rock has just retired as the interfaith officer for the Presbyterian Church. He has a new blog. It's called It's the Relationship. It's the relationship. And unless we have those times to hear each other, know each other, build trust with each other, it's impossible for us to gather in that kind of public way. So we're very delighted that we could have the opportunity to do that, but it didn't happen in 3 days.
Right. I think part of the lesson from that is don't wait for the crisis. Begin building the relationships now, and when the crisis happens, you will have this beautiful response to it. His Holiness pointed out earlier about the importance of interfaith efforts working on the ecological crisis. Rabbi Lerner, you have put together interfaith efforts for any number and any level of crises. Will you share some stories about those?
Sure. Although I do want to say that in my life, it wasn't always easy to do interfaith. My parents were strong Zionists, nevertheless decided to try to encourage me to understand other faiths and sent me to a school where I was the only Jew in the class. And in 5th grade, a little Dickie Holden came up to me and punched me in the eye and said, "You killed Christ." And I didn't know about this. I couldn't remember doing that. And so I went home and asked my parents, what? But then my teacher at the Jewish Theological Seminary, Abraham Joshua Heschel, was able to negotiate with Pope John the 23rd about, so the Vatican II changed the teaching that had been teaching of hate towards Jews that had been part of the liturgy and of the Christian world, and that was a tremendous change. And so when later he reminded me in his work about the prophets that our particularism was really also a universalism, and that the teaching of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, said, quoting God, he was quoting God and saying, "My house," that is the temple, "shall be a house for all people." And not just for the Jews. And that's, I wish we could get that in Jerusalem today, that Temple Mount be shared with all peoples and not just, so fulfilling the prophecy of this universal consciousness. So I went on to create a magazine called Tikkun, Tikkun. Tikkun is a Hebrew word. It means to heal, repair, and transform the world. And in doing that, I was able to bring in not only Jews, but many Christian leaders and then Buddhists and Muslims and others to write for us. And we then decided to create an international organization called the Network of Spiritual Progressives. And it was co-chaired by Benedictine Sister Joan Chittister and African-American religious scholar Cornel West. And that organization, our Network of Spiritual Progressives, was moving along, trying on a personal level to create these connections. And then but I felt we needed to have a larger program. And out of the blue, Keith Ellison, the first elected congressperson from the Muslim tradition, the first Muslim in Congress, called me up. He told me he had been reading Tikkun magazine, and we began to talk about what we could do together, and we developed a plan to try to counter the militarism in this country by helping people understand that the best path to homeland security was a path not of domination and control over others, but a path of generosity and kindness towards others. And so the manifestation of that was our global Marshall Plan that we developed. The global Marshall Plan that calls for the United States to take the leadership in getting all the advanced industrial countries to dedicate 1% to 2% of our gross domestic product each year for the next 20 to once and for all eliminate global poverty, homelessness, hunger, inadequate education, and inadequate health care. Keith and I became very, very close friends. And Keith has now introduced the Global Marshall Plan into the Congress as House Resolution 157. And the network of spiritual progressives is working on building local support. Hopefully, we will create some group in Chicago of spiritual progressives to do this kind of work, to get your local congresspeople and senators to back that. But the idea of working together on not only about our personal relationship, but that, although that's absolutely critical, but also about coming together for a higher vision that we can share amongst all our religious communities. And the Global Marshall Plan is one such development that helps us to acknowledge what it is in our traditions that counters the fear and the fear-based militarism that leads people to feel that the only way to be safe yourself is to have power over others, and for us to say, no, the way to be safe is through love, compassion, and generosity.
Right. I think there might be some of the network of spiritual progressives amongst us here. Now, one of the things I love about what you just articulated, Rabbi Lerner, is you illuminated the interfaith dynamic behind an awful lot of the good work in the world today. And frankly, so much of recent history over the course of the 20th century has had an interfaith dynamic at its heart. The Civil Rights Movement, of course, your teacher, Rabbi Heschel, he met Martin Luther King Jr. here in Chicago in 1963. The Hind Swaraj movement in India, there was Gandhi, there was Abdul Ghaffar Khan, the great Muslim leader. I think that part of our challenge is to make that hidden history explicit. Professor Mattson, I feel like every time I get invited to a meeting with people that have titles before their name, you're on stage. Whether it's government officials or whether it's religious leaders. And as an American Muslim, I was so proud and honored to have you as the president of the largest Muslim association in this country. And you would have a million stories to tell about large-scale efforts of interfaith cooperation. But you also have a very intimate story to tell about that. And I'm wondering if you would share that personal story.
Yes, I mean, as you say, Ibu, I first became vice president of the Islamic Society of North America Labor Day weekend 2001. So I had a really good first week. And then, then 9 very long years as vice president, then president. But what saved me was the interfaith work, the interfaith friendships, the support, the companionship, the people who stood up for me, and I didn't have to say anything. But I think, often what we see externally in these broad patterns in society are often a reflection of internal struggles within ourselves. And so I think it's relevant to raise here, my own struggle with this sense of religious identity that I faced. I've been a Muslim now almost all of my adult life, but I was not raised a Muslim. I was raised as a Roman Catholic. And when I chose in order to have integrity to my own beliefs as a teenager, to leave that tradition, I went through an interim period when I had no faith. Later, I embraced Islam, and that gave me back a commitment to a new religious community. Now, when I made that commitment, there were people around me who said, there you go, you've joined our team, and you're no longer part of those people you used to be part of. Now you're one of us. And they had a very dichotomous understanding of religious identity. You're a Muslim or a non-Muslim. And now my whole life should be changed. I was a completely different person, completely different values, superior in every way. But I knew instinctively and intuitively that there was something wrong with that. One of the deepest concepts in Islam is the concept of gratitude and ingratitude. Ingratitude towards God, called kufr, is the worst thing that you can do, but also ingratitude towards others. And I knew that it was those Roman Catholic nuns and priests, those teachers, those institutions that had been transmitted through the centuries that also gave me a very strong moral foundation, a strong sense of confidence, an excellent education. And all of those things were part of me. So to suddenly pretend that I had nothing to do with this other religious tradition would have been ungrateful and simply untrue. I also had very good friends who were Jewish, and they gave me jobs when I was a teenager, and I worked with them, and they embraced me as part of their community when I was a struggling student. So it was this internal struggle within myself. How do I be authentic to who I am and what I believe and how I live, and make a true commitment to my religious community without denying my relationships to others? And that's something that I think my own story, although it may seem unique in some respects, and is also the human story, because none of our religious traditions emerged out of history. All of the great spiritual teachers had their own teachers. All of our religious practices had roots in earlier practices. Islam has roots and relationships with Christianity and Judaism has itself came out of more ancient spiritual traditions. And that's not only a chronological line, but we continue to interact with each other. Moses Maimonides, one of the greatest Jewish teachers in religious history, learned so much from medieval Muslim theologians. Christian monastics tell me about the importance of Christians learning about the 5 daily prayers established at times of the day in Islam in order for them to make a deep commitment to regular daily prayers in Christian monasticism. So we're being unfaithful to even who we are and our ancestors when we deny that we have any spiritual or ethical kinship with each other. And so I think we need to keep that in mind as we look at these grand and very challenging global challenges, to remember who we are, and that each of us within ourselves is the result of many good people throughout history, some from our tradition and some from other traditions, forming us as human beings.
Yeah.
Thank you. Professor Madsen, I think what you're talking about is one of the reasons that so many of us have such great admiration for His Holiness, is your ability, Your Holiness, to absorb from other traditions and still stay fully committed to your own tradition. And one of the areas that you've emphasized the most, and this is something that one of the members of our college student network, Peter Ziedzic, pointed out to me, was compassion. And you have taught the world about the importance of compassion in Buddhism. But you've also written about compassion in other religions. And I'm wondering if you will share what it is you have learned from other religions about compassion.
Yeah.
No.
You.
I think I already made clear yesterday at public talk and here also. I think say more. Of course, my sort of view, they ultimately pray to God, or God as a creator. I feel the main purpose is to those people who pray to God, in their mind should sort of increase peace, calm, and there is also truthful, these things. So therefore, all major religious tradition talks the importance of love, compassion, forgiveness. And then when we describe God, infinite love. I think no tradition say God full anger. Nobody says that. Isn't it? God always love. Even to sinner, yesterday I mentioned sins and sinner. Those people who carry mischievous sort of activities. God loves them also. So that means infinite love. So the more sort of faith towards that creates a ground of practice of love and compassion. So to some people, that way of approach is much more effective, much more forceful. Then the Buddhist concept, you are your own master. Then some people may feel, oh, now everything depends on myself. Whatever I like, I can do. So for such people, I think this approach, God, we, nothing. God, but God. So we all created by God, and God, infinite love. And God always shows us love, compassion. So since we are follower of God, so we must implement these sort of, say, I think a small part of God's sort of the quality. That's loving kindness, tolerance. That's my view.
Thank you. I'm wondering if each of you can take a teaching that is central to your faith, name it, and tell us about how an encounter with another religion or your learning from another religion has enriched it. And I'm going to just briefly tell you the historical moment that I'm thinking about here, the reference point, which is when a young seminary student in 1950 went to hear a talk on Christian love and found the subject of that talk Mahatma Gandhi. And the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. had his idea of love in Christianity expanded through that lesson from an Indian Hindu. His Holiness speaks about this in his book, and he just shared about it right now. Rabbi Lerner, why don't we start with you? It's a central teaching in Judaism that you have found enriched by your learning from another religion.
Well, I mentioned the word tikkun before, and a central part of our task is to engage in the transformation of the world and to thereby embody more of God's being in our own existence and in our own social reality. Now, when we've tried to do that, we've run across what is popularly called reality. Reality is that the economic and political institutions of our society and of past societies is not based on love and kindness, on generosity. It's based on materialism, selfishness, and power and domination. So I'll give you an example. When we in the network of spiritual progressives came forward with another program, the ESRA, the Environmental and Social Responsibility Amendment to the Constitution. This is a plan that we've developed over the course of the past few years to, number one, overturn Citizens United, the decision that corporations could give as much money as possible to in elections, and so it overturns that. It also says that all money should be taken out of, all private money should be taken out of elections, and that only public money should be spent on elections, and each candidate getting an equal amount. And by the way, I worked on this with Jesse Jackson Jr. in the Congress, who actually has been a big supporter of this. And thirdly, to require corporations to get a new corporate charter once every 5 years, which they could only get if they proved a satisfactory history of environmental responsibility to a jury of ordinary citizens. So, okay, so what do I run up against? Run up against everybody saying, well, yeah, I want that, but it's totally unrealistic. Now, what our tradition has said, Judaism has taught, is that really being realistic is idolatry. Believing in God is believing that there is something about the universe, what we called it Yud-He, Vav-He, in English it's called God, that makes possible the transformation from that which is to that which ought to be. And whatever it is in the universe that makes that transformation possible, that's the God energy of the universe. But again and again, we're up against the fact that everybody who believes that in their heart, that wants to see a different world, is always telling themselves, but it's not possible. This is just me, or just me and my friends, and nobody else can do it. So when we say it's idolatry, they come back and say, well, maybe I'm an idol worshiper. I mean, maybe I don't really believe in God. Maybe I don't really believe in the possibility, because you've been working on this, on various healing of the world projects for a long time, and it hasn't happened yet. And so what I learned from Buddhism and from Buddhist teachers is this: how to let go of an attachment to outcomes. And the Buddhist teachers taught me that it was very important to not to feel that your project is worthless or not even deserving your full energies unless you can see an immediate short-term outcome. But instead, to stay with deep integrity in who you really are. And so from that teaching, that strengthened the teaching in the Jewish tradition for me, and it's made it possible for me to say to many, many people, don't be realistic. Go for your highest vision of the good, and don't waste your time on this planet accepting what other people have told you is possible, when instead fight for what is desirable and what is needed to save this planet from environmental destruction or atomic destruction. Go for our highest values. That's what.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because this is such an intimate setting, I'm going to share the conversation that Rabbi Lerner and I had backstage before this, and we were talking about our struggle with this idea, which Gandhi was such a proponent of also, and Rabbi Lerner shared with me, it's easier to be unattached to the outcome when you're not running the conference. Reverend Chamberlain, what about you? What's a central teaching in Christianity that you found enriched by another religion?
I was asked a number of years ago to name an icon, a social icon that was life-changing for me. And I thought about that for a long time. So many things could be lifted up. But the one that came to mind fondly was that first image of the earth that was taken from the moon, Earth rising. There was an indisputable unity of the earth, that while we had talked about it before, it could not be avoided in that image. I think that it would be very easy for me as a Christian to be so focused on church that I lose focus on earth. And I think particularly Buddhism, but also my other brothers, sisters, religions, have spoken of that unity and lifted up that unity for a long time. So it wasn't an altogether new concept for me, although it wasn't the Christian church that had particularly brought that forward. And then later, the National Council of Churches has had interfaith dialogue for a long time. And one of the conversations in that interfaith dialogue had to do with the Trinity. And we talked about the church imagines a unity in the body of Christ in the second person of the Trinity. And I began to think about the first person of the Trinity, that there is a unity given to us in the creation, just as His Holiness has lifted up for us today. That is at least as important and vital to us as the unity in the body of Christ, at least as important to the Christian, if not more so, than the body of Christ. So I think the reclaiming of the church, of the first person of the Trinity, and a given unity, it's not that we're working towards that. It's not that interfaith dialogue makes that happen. It's a given. And we best figure out how to make that work well. And I think that's a very countercultural concept here in the United States, where we're split into silos every which way and gone, and the world seems hell-bent on splintering into realities that are no reality. And so claiming together that for Christian, in the first person of the Trinity, there is indeed a unity of creation that we need to honor in all of its sacredness. And some of us knew that, you know. He's got the whole world in His hands. I sang that when I was 7. There's this wonderful passage in Ephesians, the God who is above all and in all and through all. But we haven't seen it with the same kind of eyes that some of our fellow faiths have done. So I give thanks that there is an emerging vision of a unity given in creation that we best figure out how to live in.
Thank you. Okay. Professor Mattson.
Well, as we try to understand the relationship between inner peace and outer peace, a very important concept for me as a Muslim is the relationship between iman or faith and amal, which are deeds. And the understanding in the Islamic position is not that we begin from a position of faith, or we begin with love in our hearts, or we begin with generosity, and then we are motivated to act to do good things. Perhaps we are. And it would be ideal if we reach a state where we were always naturally, without thought, first motivated by love and compassion and generosity, and would unthinkingly flow into these good works and good relationships. But we recognize in our tradition that we are social beings. We are contextualized in the world. And we can do things that can, if we practice them enough, can change our inner being, can transform us. If I act like a generous person, even if I don't feel like being very generous that day, but I continue to give and continue to give, that I can become a generous person. That will transform my heart. It will transform how I feel. When I do good things, I'll start to feel better, and I will now become a more generous person. And this relationship between these two things has always been very complex and a little bit difficult to understand, because Islam places so much emphasis on intention, doing things with the right intention. So there's this confusion, well, if I do something that's good and I don't really feel it, do I have the wrong intention, and is there a problem? And one of the things that I've been very intrigued with is His Holiness's interest in scientific research on human behavior and human emotions and motivations. I remember I was at the Seeds of Peace conference in Seattle a few years ago, and for many days there were workshops and conferences inspired by His Holiness's research and urging for us to understand what is the relationship between the communities we make, the forms of pedagogy we have, how we teach moral formation, and the inculcation of peace within our hearts. And that made me, as I did my ethical research, look more closely at our schools, our institutions, our communities. How do we create not just rituals, but practices that support the development of loving and kind and generous people? And I was very inspired by a number of the speeches and writings that His Holiness did in this area. And I feel that this is part of the key for all of us to find those mechanisms that are consistent. Because, as I was saying to you last night, Ibu, Ramadan's coming up in 2 weeks. And believe me, there are not many Muslims in the world who are going to wake up and say, I really feel like denying myself food and drink for the next 18 hours, for the next 30 days. It's not a natural sort of thing that you just want to do, but we do the discipline, and the discipline then creates within us awareness, hopefully, awareness of God, a heightened awareness of the suffering of others, and a eagerness to look for opportunities to alleviate that suffering. So I think this relationship between disciplines, regular practices, and the transformation of the inner heart is something that I'm continuing to learn from the Buddhism, especially as taught by His Holiness. Thank you.
Reverend Chamberlain used the word countercultural for the insight that she pointed out, and it seems to me that the entire conversation we're having right now could be considered countercultural, because we are talking about what we admire about other people's religions. And it feels like we live in a time when there is an awful lot of information about what we should dislike or fear or hate about other people's religions. And it seems like the us and them are stark, and they're at each other's throats. And as we were talking about this last night, Reverend Chamberlain, you told this beautiful story about receiving an award from a Muslim group in Minneapolis and what you said in your acceptance speech. And I'm wondering if you would share that.
I looked out at this group of clearly brothers and sisters who shared many of the values that I shared. Not the same practice, not the same belief framework, but many values, and were holding in their lives some of those same things as you just mentioned, Dr. Manson, that we all want to practice and live into. As I did that, I looked out and I said, there's a fringe element of your community that wants to fight with the fringe element of my community, who very much wants to take on that battle. And if either side wins, we're all in trouble. There isn't an option for us who aren't on the fringe. There isn't an option for us not to take on the discipline of interfaith understanding, interfaith activity, interfaith proclamation about that they are not those. They are us. And we need to be able to say that, show that, and live that in our lives. Otherwise, the fringes are going to continue to fight. And if either side wins, we're all in trouble.
Right. So as Reverend Chamberlain was talking about this and pointing out what you did right now, which is we need a path and a language for this, Rabbi Lerner offered that to us.
Well, yes, the way I understand it is that most of us, almost everyone on the planet, has heard two different worldviews. One worldview is the worldview that says we're all alone in this world. We're thrust into a world where people are looking out for themselves and only care about themselves. And they will do whatever it takes to maximize their own advantage without regard to the consequences for others. And they will seek to dominate and control you unless you seek to dominate and control them first. So it's a scary world, a world in which we need to protect ourselves from the other and on a national level protect ourselves from all the others in the world. Now, that worldview is in everyone's head, but there's another worldview that is also in everyone's head, because most of us came into the world through a mother and had the experience of being loved simply for the sake of the love. Our mothers didn't have a good, a reasonable expectation of a good return on their investment of love for us.
My wife is laughing loudly at that right now.
Well, many people, when I've said this in public before, many people come up to me and say, "You don't know my mother, Rabbi Lerner." But what I say back is, I'll stipulate that your mother is as neurotic as you think she is, but nevertheless, you wouldn't have survived without that loving experience. And from that loving experience comes a different worldview, a worldview that says that our safety and security can come through generosity and caring and love for each other rather than through domination and control over the other. Now, because it's in every one of us, both of these voices are in every religious tradition. And also every secular tradition, including psychoanalysis and feminism and Marxism and every worldview. Nevertheless, you'll find, because it's in every person. But in our communities, our religious communities, we find that a very large number of people tend to move in one or the other of these directions. And those who move in my community towards fear and domination are those who, right now, for example, feel that the only way the Jewish people can be safe is through having a state of Israel that has a huge amount of power, but not as much compassion for the Palestinian people. But there's another tendency in our people, which is the other voice, the voice of love and kindness and generosity. And those people tend to say, no, our safety as a people will come when we take care of other people and when we show generosity. So I am on that side, right? And I find in my community that I often have that since this same division happens in almost every religious community, as well as every secular community, that I have more in common with the people who are the love-oriented people in Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and secularism than I have with the domination people in my own tradition. Do you see what I mean? So that leads me to feel instinctively like I am the brother, that these are my sisters, that I have a huge amount in common with people of every faith tradition and no faith tradition who are willing to go towards the voice of hope and the voice of love and the voice of caring, and not as much. Now, that doesn't mean I want to reject them. I don't want to reject them because I believe that they also, most of them are people who would move towards more love if they believed it was possible, if it was possible to do that. So I don't want to reject anybody and in fact, how could I reject them when I know that in myself and in every person I've ever met, the voice of fear is also there. It's also in every one of us. And so we ourselves are constantly balancing between these two voices in every interaction with other people. Is this somebody I can trust or is this somebody I can't trust? And so similarly, I'm not going to put down anybody on that other side, but I am going to say that I have an awful lot in common with and feel like they are my true allies, the Christians, the Buddhists, the Muslims, the Hindus, the secular humanists, who want to build a world based on love and generosity.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, one of my favorite lines in in the American 20th century is when your teacher, Rabbi Heschel, was in Selma with the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and wrote afterwards that he knew that their liturgies, this Orthodox rabbi from Eastern Europe and this Black Baptist from the American South, their liturgies were different. But marching in Selma, he felt like his feet were praying. And I think that's the ethic that you're articulating.
Beautiful.
So you just teed up the tough question for Professor Mattson. And this actually comes from Lori from Skokie, which came through the Facebook outreach that we did, which was, what happens when the people who one might characterize as having that other mindset sit at your dinner table and you love them and they're your family? How should those of us who seek to be interfaith leaders engage with those who seem to us, on the outside at least, to exhibit biases or prejudice, etc.? By the way, Reverend Chamberlain, Rabbi Lerner, Your Holiness, you might not escape this question either. I just want to pose it to Professor Mattson first.
Well, there's no getting around prejudice and bias. No human being can do that. The whole way we understand the world is by categorizing people. Those who cannot put people into categories in order to understand them, in fact, are characterized as mentally ill. So we need to do that. The key is to understand that our mind works that way and recognize that, and then identify if, as we're doing that, we're being untruthful, unfair, and making, on top of that, value judgments about those categories. It's very easy, I think for me, it's easy at this point in my life not to be self-righteous when I encounter these people, because I, in fact, at many periods of my life, was a very ignorant person and imposed my own views and values and prejudices on others. And I think that's one of the benefits of getting older, is that you see, you learn from your experience and you begin to have some humility. But I think that what you cannot solve or overcome someone's fear and anger and outrage in a single encounter. And you're going to run into disaster if you're sitting at the dinner table and there's a cousin or an uncle and they say something racist or prejudice, and you just are the censor at the dinner table and try to correct them. Mm-hmm. It will humiliate them, and they'll naturally cling on even more deeply to what they said because now they've been embarrassed. So there's two things that need to be done. One is to make sure that your relationships are meaningful and you have the patience to continue to engage with them, that you don't cut off relationships at that moment. Mm-hmm. And the way to do that is to continue the meal, continue the conversation, making connections through the good things you identify in them. Because certainly even their prejudicial statement might come out of a good place, a feeling of injustice or anger against something that they perceive to be unfair, even if they're misinformed. So to identify that good thing in them, and then you're going to have a relationship that will continue. And I can tell you, I have, just to bring in another personal element, when I first, chose to become a Muslim, and it was a different choice than anyone in my family had made, they were very afraid. There was a lot of misunderstanding. There were some very hurtful statements made. But I said, this is my family. I know they love me. They're speaking out of love. Mm-hmm. And their own fear for me. And we continued to work over 24 years of being together and coming back and back and back. And I had the most beautiful honor, this year, because of that patience and that commitment, that I was asked to officiate at the wedding of my Jewish nephew and his Hindu fiance this year. So, So it's the love that we have for each other that sustained us through that, despite some very painful moments. And that's why nothing can replace those commitments to what is good for that person, and to certainly not to remember that we are never in a place as human beings that's different than them. We also are shaped by those fears and prejudices, although we may have been privileged to learn some different information.
Thank you for that. I'm going to let you two think on that for a few minutes, and I'm going to pose the most challenging version of this question to His Holiness. Your Holiness, you've spoken of the mischievous elements in a range of religions and the destruction that they have frankly caused for humanity. Have you had any experience, or even better, success in reaching out to some of those elements in any religion?
As I mentioned earlier, now nearly 7 million human beings, it is wrong to expect entire humanity become good people. Difficult. 다 간다 감담마바 타대기 띵무지 정하다.
So first of all, what is very important is to really have a deep recognition that people are different at a very, at some level. There are going to be different inclinations, different interests, and different dispositions.
Even within family, sort of biologically some relations, but there are different views, different mental disposition. Even within the same sort of follower of same religion, there are different mental disposition. I think Buddhists, some Buddhists may have more interest in certain thing, some other different field. So similarly, I think among the Christian, some prefer more solitude life and thank God and practice love. And some prefer more sort of active sort of service to others. So the variety of people. You personally loves serving to others. You cannot say this is best way to other one who prefer more solitude life. So it is your own different interest. Now, for example, one non-believer who criticizes religion, and if you try to convert to accept religion, that's quite difficult. So leave it. A non-believer, okay. You feel religious faith is sort of extra burden, feel like that. Okay, doesn't matter. One thing, these people are also human beings, part of the humanity. Basic human quality, warm-heartedness, and sense of community, and sense of sort of, we are part of the humanity. Whether there is creator or not, whether it is next life or heaven or there is secondary level, personal sort of business. But some common thing is, everybody wants happy world. Nobody wants trouble. Nobody wants violence. And everybody wants more peaceful society, happy society. And the climate also, I think, when we heard the global warming, it immediately, you see, brings some kind of anxiety and the pollution. Really. So no need to teach. Automatically, you see, we have. Now here, in order to have happier humanity, anger, everybody knows, anger will not bring happiness. Violence will not bring happiness. Only peaceful. How peaceful? What is peaceful? Without feeling like a robot. That's not peaceful. There is potential of crisis, but use human intelligence, human warm-heartedness, restraint, joining that trouble. That's peace. Everybody, now here, no differences, believer or non-believer. Even animal want peace. So that, I think, I feel, my sort of main approach, as I mentioned earlier, the secular ethics, is aiming that everybody want happy life, happy world. I never sort of try propagating Buddhism. I never. I just to see, try make sort of the contribution from my tradition to better world. That's all. So then, firstly, you have to make distinction, believer, non-believer. Then among the believer, the religious harmony. So if someone, I think we have to sort of know the variety of mental disposition. And from Buddhist viewpoint, or Buddhist or ancient Indian sort of, also the
point of view,
understanding that not only one life, but life after life. So we also, you see, have the view. Today's the certain way of thinking, way of sort of mental disposition related with previous lives. Previous life, not only one, but hundreds, thousands, limitless. So that creates more sort of additional problem. So we cannot deal these things. So it doesn't matter. Today's reality. You mentioned some distinction, reality.
Realistic.
I think after all, God creates the present. Also, God creates. Original human being or world created by God. So once He created God, once He created the world, then He never bother world. That's not the case. So He must take maximum care about His own creation. So the present also, you see, there are some connection with God, right? From the theistic viewpoint. This is not from the Buddhist viewpoint or Jainism viewpoint. And anyway, so that sort of the theistic sort of religious sort of thinking, really wonderful, really wonderful. So I feel, firstly, we must accept there are so many different mental dispositions. And we must accept each one have their own right. Then wrongdoing, harmful, actually that person do not want that, but out of ignorance. Nobody wants this trouble. I often say telling people, when we get up early morning, nobody feel oh, today I should have more problem. Nobody feels that. Even those people who often you see come across some trouble, and at least the early morning they say, oh, today I wish less problem. Like that. Then these problems, of course, the old age and problem might of knees. You see, when I stand up, sitting, these now biological factor you have to accept. Then many problems actually are mental creation. Right kind of a mental attitude. No matter what problem, you can maintain peace of mind, calm. That we have. I think one way God give us. That is the special gift to human being, not animal. So that precious gift from God. Now we must utilize that properly. So judging long-term benefit, short-term benefit. Then long-term benefit is more important than short-term benefit. Many problems due to short-sighted. Although do not want problem, but due to short-sighted and also narrow-minded, lack of knowing the holistic. Then these problems happen or created. So therefore, I think education, more wider sort of perspective, and I usually use the word realistic. So that means any our object or our goal depend action. Action brings that goal. May I say so? Not through prayer. Pray to God, or may not materialize what you want. You must act. You must work. So therefore, every goal, depend on our action. The action must be realistic action. Unrealistic action always fail to bring the result. So realistic action, you have to know the reality fully. In order to know the reality, you have to look more wider perspective, wider way.
Wider perspective.
All different angles. Or if there is the sufficient time, if mad dog come, then no time to investigate from where it come, where go. No time, you have to run away. Or you see, I usually drink hot water. So sometimes too hot, and then come. So then no time. Kasura, how many minutes do you see cooked water?
Boiled.
Boiled. No need, you see, the investigation.
Just spit it out.
Otherwise, you see, some important matter, we have to investigate thoroughly. When we carry investigation, our mind must be very objective. Now, religious case also. Yesterday also I mentioned. I'm Buddhist, but too much attachment towards my own religion, Buddhism. Then my mind biased. With that sort of kind of mental attitude, you cannot see the value of other tradition. So must be objective. Objective. So when we carry investigation, our mind must be neutral. When we investigate, when we carry investigation, no idea of right or wrong, simply, or positive or negative, simply what's the reality? Investigate. Then once we got the full picture about the reality, then our method become a realistic method. Like that. So in order to develop calm mind, now faith works. So tremendous faith towards God. All creation of God, essentially 100% positive. That due to our own sort of lack of understanding, lack of not knowing the reality, out of our own ignorance, then often these mistakes or these sort of bad things happen. I think you can look from that view. Isn't it? Like that. So that I want to share with believer, if we really try to bring conviction to those non-believer, it is useless work. better leave that.
One of the things that strikes me.
Oh.
One of the things that strikes me from what you just said is religion is very often portrayed as a bomb of destruction or a barrier of division, but it's also a bubble of isolation. And you, of all people, could have chosen to live within the bubble of Tibetan Buddhism. And instead, any time you encountered a different tradition, whether it was Christianity or Islam or Judaism or science, you took time to learn from that tradition and to see the best in it.
Oh.
I want to thank you for being an example of learning and seeing the best in others.
I think.
So we have time for.
May I add a little bit here? May I add something?
No.
Absolutely. You're in the soft chair.
Firstly, we are same human being. So that's a fundamental level. I'm Tibetan, I'm Buddhist, but still, fundamental level, I'm a human being. When we drink water, nobody feels I'm Buddhist, no, I should drink this. You, as you feel I'm Muslim, I must drink this water as a God's creation. No, as a human being, feel hungry, eat food. And then, of course, sometimes you see some sort of prayer before food. Otherwise, basically, as a human being, the 24 hours, our activities basically carry as a human being. Not Muslim or not Christian, not Buddhist, not Hindu. And then secondary level, yes, we have some prayer, some meditation. Then according Hinduism, according Buddhism, according Islam or Christianity and Judaism like that. That is secondary. So, if you use common sense, the most important is the fundamental human level. That's my belief. So wherever I go, I never felt this is non-Buddhist, I'm Buddhist. This is non-Asian, I'm Asian. This is non-Tibetan, I'm Tibetan. I never felt that. I always look human level. I don't care what's their position, what's their social background. Some people, when they meet some important people, they behave something different. Then meet some beggar, different attitude. That is totally wrong. We are same human being. One time in India, You Indian origin, right?
Islam.
You're
No,
from India.
Indian.
though.
Right.
You're from India.
There's 130 million Muslims in India. I'm one of them.
Indian origin. One time in India, one officials, as they came, and a family member, and one the child, very small, carried by Yomuchi.
A nanny. A nanny. Yeah.
Then, when I received them, I shake hand, the father as official, and mother. And same way, I try to shake hand the
Nanny.
Nanny.
Oh.
Then you see that poor woman, a little hesitant, respond to me, shake hand. Why? Same human being. I'm shaking sort of hand, the father, not as an official, but as a human being. Then the poor woman, human being, same right. I have respect. But when I go
Extend
there,
long.
she shows some surprise. These are sad things. I think one of the sources of problem among humanity. I think we always consider the secondary level things are more important than forgetting the basic, fundamental, same human being. That we need is some sort of effort
to promote. No?
I want to ask one final question before we have to close our program. Not every place is as warm and loving as the Harris Theater, right? And I imagine that the people on this stage have received as much or more anger as they have applause, right? As much or more dismissal or even denigration as they have devotion. And Fareen Jawani, who is a graduate of our Interfaith Leadership Training Program, asked a very simple question. How do you keep going? How do you keep going amidst anger and suffering and hatred and violence? And I just want to go down the line and give His Holiness the last word and start with you, Reverend Chamberlain.
Do I have a choice? I think when these are the values that are central to who we are, we don't have a choice. And there's a joy in just being in those values. I must be in those values. I must be in that place. I think there's an opportunity for some humor in all of that. I have kept on my voicemail the call that I got. In the name of Jesus Christ, I demand that you step down from your ordination. Okay, I hear ya. And the next day I got an email and I said, that sounds like the same voice. And there was a name on that email, and so I sent back. And the next thing you knew, we were talking on the phone. And I was much harder to deal with talking on the phone than I was when I was being dealt with anonymously. So, I mean, it's the relationship. Each of these relationships offer us an opportunity to be present to those values that we hold so dear. And that's what has meaning, is to be present in those values. There are times when we just have to walk away. I hear you, and we disagree, and I see that there's no space in your life for me. God bless you. Next.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us, Reverend. Rabbi Lerner.
Yeah, part of the answer there is that it's community, that we can't face these issues just on our own. And often when somebody says to me, well, what do I do at the dinner table? And I have somebody saying outrageous things, I say, well, you can't convince there, just what you had said. But what is really needed is not to try to ask what's the magic key to transforming the consciousness of the people who are furthest away from me. There are so many people in this society, in fact, all over the world, whose basic instinct is towards loving and caring and generosity. But they don't believe that there are others, enough others who share that same perspective. And instead of focusing on how do we go to the extremes, let's try to focus on building support amongst the people who feel that, but feel alone, feel that there aren't enough people around. And that's why we created this network of spiritual progressives, which is also welcoming to and it's an interfaith organization, also welcoming to humanists who don't believe in any particular religion, but who do feel that they want a world based on love and caring and generosity. And by the way, as an aside, and you told me I could do this, that if you're interested in connecting to us or to me, we have a website, two places to go, tikkun, tikkun.org, or spiritualprogressives.org. Go to those websites and see that there's a whole national movement of spiritually rooted people who want a different kind of world. We need a community. We can't do it by ourselves. And what I find in the Jewish community is this big split. The most important one, the one that I get death threats literally every week, and in this past year, 3 times my house has been assaulted by people who have disagreed with the perspective of Tikkun and the network of spiritual progressives, because our perspective is that Israel and Palestine have to reconcile, but the reconciliation has to be a reconciliation of the heart, and not just a political agreement, but a transformation in consciousness. And that can happen. So many people that I know in my community say, but don't you know that the Muslims, they don't want this, or the Arabs or the Palestinians, they don't want this. What they want is to wipe you out. And I say, no, that's not true. That we have to recognize that the other, whoever the other is just as likely to want what we want as we are. That they're just as likely to want a world of peace and generosity and security for themselves as we. And stop projecting onto the other all this sense of evil. I've just written a book that will be coming out in the fall called Embracing Israel-Palestine. And what we need is to embrace the other with love and caring and kindness. But it's scary to do that by yourself. We need a community that can affirm this together. So there's where I draw on my faith tradition. My faith tradition isn't really about converting other people to Judaism or telling us, but it is about saying that the world could be based. Well, we could have a new bottom line in this world in which institutions and social practices, our government policies, corporations, our educational system, instead of being judged efficient or rational or productive, to the extent that they maximize money and power, we need that's the old bottom line. We could have a new bottom line in which people are judging our corporations, our government policies, our individual behavior also as efficient, rational, and productive to the extent that they maximize love and caring, kindness and generosity, ethical and ecological sensitivity, and awe and wonder at the grandeur and magnificence of this universe. That's a new bottom line. And with that, now that new bottom line provokes a lot of fear in people, as well as a lot of hope in people. And you can't do it by yourself. That's why we're inviting you to join the network of spiritual progressives or something. If it's not our organization, go with other people. And that's been the strength of the Jewish people, is that we've held together as a people. Now I believe that we need interfaith organizations, interfaith efforts. Be part of a community. Don't just do it yourself. Join, if you don't want our thing, join something and make your life connected to other people whose common vision is to go for that new bottom line of love and caring and kindness and generosity.
Thank you. Great. Your disquisitions remind me of Grateful Dead songs. They start on a theme, and they come back to the theme. I love it. Thank you. I shouldn't have told you that, Professor Madsen.
Well, you know, Ibu, I think I'm still a relatively young woman, but as of this year, I will have 10 years more than the average life expectancy of an Afghan woman. I'm going to be 48 this year. Now, throughout the world, there are people who today are spending their day ducking drone missiles, avoiding tiptoeing through fields of landmines to try to get to an agricultural field. Women who will spend, not women, girls, 8, 9-year-old girls, who will spend 3-4 hours to get to a source of water. And they're probably going to that one because the one they used to go to has dried up because of global warming. I'm not a self-made person. I didn't choose to be born into my family, into my country, into my time. I may have made along the way some better choices than others, but all of those opportunities were not created by me. And I know how many people there are just today, how many millions of human beings are in prison, much less, out in the world simply trying to meet their survival. And I don't feel that I have, am I, because I have the freedom, the freedom and the opportunity to be with all of you, and that you have the freedom and opportunity today to be with me. We're not better. We simply have more responsibility. There's an Islamic teaching that there are people who will come to the end of their life and say, oh God, just give me another life. This time I'll do it well. Put me back in my body, and this time I'll do it right. Well, in this country, we have a second life. You reach 45, and compared to most of humanity throughout history, you have another life. We have another life. What are we going to do with that? Especially when so much of what we are doing is creating problems for other people in the world. And so I've never felt anything other than a tremendous sense of gratitude that I have the opportunity, to move freely. The Quran talks about the dignity of humanity being based on the ability to move. The karama of human being comes from their freedom, their ability to move and meet and interact. We have that, and I think that we all need to, all of us are elite here. Not just those on the stage, everyone in this theater. If you're here today, you're an elite person in the world, and even in human history, there's tremendous potential, and I think we just have to seize that opportunity.
Thank you. Your Holiness, I'd like you to close us out. Yesterday...
Now close means 0. So now 0. I have nothing to say. I really enjoy our discussion, and I really admire all the speakers not only just the word, but your own life, fully committed what you believe. So that's wonderful. So then you originally come from India. So India, as I mentioned earlier, I feel really model of the rest of the world. All different institutions remain together, live together. And then, 1,000 years, the concept of ahimsa, non-violence, there. So wherever I go, I always talk non-violence. Non-violence means not just a mere absence of violence, but non-violence, as I mentioned before, with sense of respect others' life, sense of sort of respect others' right.
Welfare,
And then, although you have the sort of ability to harm them, but deliberately restrain, that's non-violence. So, I always talk about the non-violence and the religious harmony. That's some new ideas come from my brain. No, I simply learned from India's 1,000-year-old tradition. Therefore, I discover myself as a messenger of ancient Indian treasure. So within India, we not much sort of notice these things. We take for granted. When I visit Northern Ireland and also heard there's some problems between Sunni, Shia, and in Northern Ireland, Protestant and Catholic, and some other places also. It's that kind of sad news has come. Then I really felt, oh, India, the Indonesia, the biggest Muslim population. Then second most Muslim populated nation is India. As I mentioned earlier, few cases, some little problems here and there, but overall wonderful. So I usually sit urging my Indian Muslim friends, now you should take more active role where there's a conflict within the Muslim community, follow of same sort of the spiritual leader, Muhammad, and using same text, Quran, and 5 times sort of pray. Then little differences here, Sunni and Shia, on the basis of small sort of differences, and then forgetting the basic sort of commonality. It is very pity, very sad. So I urge my Indian Muslim brothers, sisters, you should take more active role. So I want to tell you that.
I was giving you a job, you gave me a job.
And I also very much appreciate, I very much appreciate your sort of concern about women's rights. There are difficulties. That also very, very good. Then, okay. Then you, I think, special sort of effort to come closer between Palestine and Jewish or Israeli. I have some friends in Israel, so a few occasions I visited there. My first time were there in Tel Aviv. Right? When first I got a lot of sort of information from my Jewish friend. I felt, oh, they have really truth, their side. They say it's 1,000 years ago, you see the Jewish people there, and their rights, these things. Then I met one group, Palestinians, were just opposite, a lot of complaint. I really found huge sort of gap. And then meantime, you see this, some people in both sides stand tough. Through that way, never solve this problem. I think your view bring together. And one time I think in Jerusalem, one conference, one teacher, one Jewish teacher, he told our gathering in his class. You see, he told some Palestinian sort of student in his class, when you met some people, usually you get some kind of irritation or some anger. You should think the other person, image of God. So after he shared that view to his student, then later some student reports him. After we got this idea, and when we met some Israeli checkpost person, we remember that our mental sort of state becoming much more calm. So like that. And then there are a small group, some Jewish, some Israelis, some Palestinians, really working hard to bring some kind of sense of same community. Although very small. At that time, when I met them, I gave them every sort of encouragement. This is the seed of the solution of future problem. So I very much appreciate your effort.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I hope to see you visit Israeli and, if possible, the Palestinian area, and share your view more wider way. I think better. The justice is saying express here, and then some message go there. Better. See, your face very nice, your beard very
Impressive.
Very impressive. So with that head, and go there, and more talk, personal sort of express personally. I think make some impact, and you also. I think go these areas.
Come with me. Come with me.
That's very good. Then, of course, your experience, you see, you mentioned, really wonderful. The
story you told about the person who left that message, but then later you were able to meet in person. That was very moving. Yeah.
I also have some occasion. That's mainly the political field. One Englishman who was close friend of late Prime Minister of Chinese government, the Zhu Enlai, very close friend. So one day in, I think, 70s, he came to see me, and his whole view is the Chinese view, communist view. Then 3 days we talk. Then gradually his mental attitude changed. So power of truth is always very, very powerful. So we should believe the power of truth. And in order to carry power of truth, you yourself, 24 hours, must be honest, truthful. When you reflect your own daily life, if you develop full conviction, I carry my life truthful, honest way, compassionate way, then your word to others becoming much more forceful, isn't it? That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Holiness. We're going to present the traditional scarves for our panelists.
Right. Get an extra one.
A blessing and gratitude for their participation today and for yours.
Yeah.
We want to thank Tim Boyd, Betty and David Bland, the host committee, Anina Schrader, and her commitment for making this
Thank you.
visit by His Holiness the Dalai Lama a reality.
Thank you.
I get another one.
You already have, yes.
Thank you. Choose better than one.
On this scarf, a Tibetan script here, one sort of prayer there, prayer. Person who keeps this days and nights, be happy.
Thank you.
But there's no guarantee. Ultimately, peace of mind depends on your own heart.
Exactly. Yes, I agree entirely.
Okay. Thank you. 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 Thank you.
That's guaranteed. Be happy.
So thank you very much. Now, afternoon, I'm leaving to my second home, India. So you remain with your own problem. so you have to manage your own problem.
That's right.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.